this is week 4 of our series on the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And for those of you who missed at least 1 week, which is everybody except for me, so it's okay, I think. Maybe Roger was here the whole time. I think Roger might have been here the whole time. You get a gold star. So the 4 agreements are, he calls them a practical guide to personal freedom. I agree, obviously. So number 1, be impeccable with your word. Now, at first glance, that might seem like follow through on your promises, which is part of it, and a very good part, right? Follow through on what you say you're going to do. But it's more than that, because we're talking about our word, not just the word we say, but the words we think, because there's lots of words we think that we don't actually say, right? You've been through traffic lately? And then there's what we do, which is another, usually a follow through of what we think and what we believe about ourselves is usually what we do. And so being impeccable with our word, it means that we are not doing anything against ourselves. So being impeccable means being without against ourselves. So that means our thoughts, our words, and our actions are for our highest good. That is a really tall order. It is super easy to understand. Not so easy in the doing part, because you might realize, oh wow, I've been saying that such and such is a pain in the neck. Oh really? Are you enjoying that pain in the neck? Would you like? Is that for you? Just something to think about. And sometimes things might not even be that obvious. So when we start saying, I'm going to be impeccable with my words spoken, unspoken, my actions, like I said, a tall order. It's a lifelong practice, but it brings us to more freedom. And so that's number 1. Number 2 and number 3 are sort of the breaking it down and helping us do it a little better. So number 2, the second agreement is don't take anything personally. Oy. I know you guys like that one, right? That's really hard. It can be really, really hard because we see things happen and we're like, oh, well, that happened. And then they didn't invite me to the thing. And so that must mean that they don't like me. And I'm going to take it personally because I like them. But it could be totally unrelated. It could be that it could be that the invitation actually literally got lost in the mail. I'll tell you, when my husband and I got married, it was 4 years ago, and we had, I know some people are all about like having specific invitations and they have a plated dinner. We had a potluck, everybody come on down, okay? And I thought we had been extremely explicit with we'd send emails out to people, we're having a potluck, everybody come. Anybody who wants to be, come. We'd put it on Facebook, everybody who wants to come on down. We really were going to have the reception at a barn, and I was going to wear my cute boots, and then we got snowed out, so that part didn't happen. The boots happened, but the barn part didn't. So, so I thought we'd been really explicit with this, if you're reading this, you're invited kind of invitation. That should, to me, mean everybody's coming. And yet still, you hear from a person who says, so-and-so wasn't sure if that, I'm like, so they, made it, so that's number 2 and number 3 go together. Because number 3 is don't make assumptions. So, you say something personally like, oh, they didn't invite me to the wedding. And I'm like, how could we be even more explicit? Apparently we could have been even more explicit with everybody come on down. And so they, somehow put something together because they didn't specifically get an email or whatever. I don't know. And that's what happens. We take things personally when it's really not. But how do you know who to send them to? Because, like I said, I mean, really, it just said Facebook. If you're reading this, you're invited. Plus the emails to the people who don't Facebook. I thought that was pretty obvious. So yeah, number 3, don't make assumptions. We fill in a lot of stuff in our brains. We fill in a lot of stuff that we think we know why such and such is happening. What are they doing construction about? I don't know. Maybe it's da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, we're always making assumptions. And sometimes assumptions aren't really that hurtful. Maybe we have a lot of information that we're using to base our best guess on. And maybe that's not so bad. But it gets us in a lot of trouble, especially in interpersonal relations, when we assume that somebody we live with is going to unload the dishwasher because we want them to, not because we have an explicit agreement about it. And then we get mad because they didn't do the thing that we didn't agree with them that they were going to do, and it causes problems. So if we don't have an explicit agreement, we're going to meet every day, every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, then we shouldn't expect them to show up. Or at least we shouldn't get mad if they don't. We get ourselves in a lot of trouble that way. So, number 4, the 4th agreement, and let me just backtrack and tell you why they're called agreements. The 4 agreements are called this because the author postulates that we do this thing where we all agree to a lot of things in our world. That's sort of our conditioning as humans. Like, we've all decided to call the color that these chairs is blue. And that helps us understand and communicate with one another, right? We say, oh, the chairs are blue. Now, we can have a lot of conversations about what shade you want to call it, but I think we'd probably all agree that they fall into the category of blue. And that is an agreement that works. But there's a lot of agreements that we take on that aren't necessarily so helpful and universally true, like there's not enough, or I'm not enough, or I have to do a certain thing or be a certain way or look a certain, whatever. All of those things that fall into that category of agreements that we've made with ourselves and with the world that just aren't true. So while agreement that we call this blue, and that at least here in this country we drive on the right side of the road, I mean, that's an agreement I think I'm pretty big fan of, all of us being pretty much on the same page with that. I think it makes a lot more order in our world. But I don't think us thinking, all agreeing that there's not enough is something that's working for our world. So that's why we call them agreements. And so these agreements are about breaking the ones that aren't working and about making new ones that really are in alignment. So we make our words and thoughts and actions impeccable, in alignment with what is our truth. We don't take anything personally because it causes trouble. We don't make assumptions because it also causes trouble. And then number 4 is always do your best. Because our best is not always the same. When we're sick, when we're not feeling well, when we didn't get enough sleep, when we have a whole bunch of things going on, our best doesn't look as good as when we're well rested and perfectly radiantly healthy, and we've had all the preparation we need and all of those things, right? Not that all of those things usually all happen at once for most of us, but we can pretend, right? So our best is not always the same, and it's okay. And so this is really helpful in the putting into action of our agreements, because we know that sometimes we're not going to be perfectly impeccable with our word. So instead of saying, well, we're going to screw it up anyway, so let's forget it, we just say, today I'm going to do my best. I'm going to do my best to be impeccable with my word, to have my actions be in alignment with the truth of who I am. And today I'm going to do my best to not take anything personally. And if I notice that I am, I'm just going to say, oops, and then I'm going to move on. And I'm going to do my best to not make assumptions, because we do it all the time, whether we realize it or not. And you know what? We do it, we notice it, and we move on. And when we notice, oh, I'm going to take responsibility for that assumption that wasn't actually a fact, then we can just not get caught up in whatever's left over from that, right? But we have to say, okay, I'm going to do my best. And some days I'm going to do a really bad job. I'm going to do a really bad job. But I'm still going to do my best. And so the trouble, I think, is that sometimes we let ourselves off the hook a little too soon. There's a balance point, right? And we say, oh, well, I was doing my best. And I want to, so if we're going to be impeccable with our word, which means we're going to do our very best to be in alignment with our highest truth. And then we're going to say, I'm going to do my best. Can you honestly come back to yourself and say, was that my best for where I was at that moment? Remember the at that moment part, because that part's important. Because we don't want to hold ourselves to a standard of who we were 20 years ago and what we could have done then. My dear husband, for some reason, still thinks he someday might be as fit as he was when he was in the Marine Corps. And I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Because that was 22 years ago, right? But how about our best for right now where we're at, right? It's a much more compassionate and reasonable thing, right? So we're going to be, I mean, it could happen, but really. So if we're going to be the most in alignment with who we are, and then we're going to say we're going to do our best, then let's be honest with ourselves. Like, and I'm not saying that I do this all the time, but are we really doing our best? Are we really making that choice? It's an uncomfortable question, because sometimes you realize some things about yourself that you don't want to know. But that's okay, because we're going to do our best, and we're going to just keep moving closer and closer to who we came here to be and what we want to do. We're not aiming or pretending that perfection actually happens. We're just doing our best, right? So I'm going to read you a little paragraph from the book. Doing your best doesn't really feel like work because you enjoy whatever you are doing. You know you're doing your best when you're enjoying the action or doing it in a way that you will not have negative repercussions for you. You do your best because you want to do it, not because you have to do it, not because you are trying to please the inner judge, and not because you are trying to please other people. If you take action because you have to, then there is no way you're going to do your best. So that's the tricky thing, right? Because there's things that we do, quote unquote, have to do, like pay taxes and drive on the right side of the road. And I mean, I guess we don't have to, but it's usually good to do it. And if we live with a person, usually there's some things that we've agreed to do as far as like dishwasher duty and things like that maybe aren't our preference. But what if you reframe those things that were like, this and that, I don't really want to do this, so I'm not going to do my best? Well, you know, washing dishes is part of cooking, and I like cooking, and I like eating. I really like both of those parts. So this is just part of that process, and if I can reframe it into, instead of taking it personally that someone else didn't do it, and just be like, well, this is what needs to be done, then I'm a happier camper. Everybody I live with is a happier camper. And I'm not going off and being a grouchy pants, which is not who I want to be. So I'm not even being impeccable with my word if I'm being a grouchy pants on people for not doing things that they didn't agree to do. So it's sort of a little mind trick that we play with ourselves, right? So we want to do our best, and we affirm that we do our best, and we look at what we're doing and say, are we doing our best, and can we do it even more, to be more in alignment with who we are? And at the same time, like I said, there's things that we do because we have agreed to do them, and so to follow through on the things that we've agreed to do, we either need to make new agreements or we need to do them. but we don't want to do things not well. So we need to find a way to make that something we want to do. We want to follow through on our agreements. So that makes it something we want to do, right? Interesting. These are very interesting things to think about. I can't tell you the answers. You have to figure it out on your own, in your own process. Not that we can't talk about that, but I can't give you the answers to figure out these things on your own. And so, of course, it always comes back down to what is one of the biggest tool, along with remembering these steps to help us get there and be able to stay there. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? What's our biggest tool in our toolbox? Meditation. Good job. Nancy gets a gold star today, too. And so I know that I don't do my best when I don't meditate in the morning. And if I'm being a grouchy pants, did I meditate today? Oh, shoot. Somehow my morning schedule got messed up and I didn't. Usually my first bet. Even before making sure I'm hydrated, did I meditate? So when I do that, when I take the time to set aside all the jibber jabber of the world, and even if I feel like all the monkeys in my mind did not shut up the whole time, it makes a difference in my day. It really does. Because I'm able to see clearer. Oh, I want to be in alignment with oh, wait, I'm taking something personally. I could do better than that. And it really helps me stay clear and focused. Like I said, those of you who have hung out with me know that it doesn't always work. It's not 100%. But we're getting there. I'm doing my best. And so these agreements, being impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. I really do think are a great keys to your personal freedom, to having a better, more exciting, wonderful, free, happy, joyful, abundant life. And so I want to remind you, so this week is the state games for Special Olympics. And so they have over 250 Special Olympic athletes have come in from all over the state here to Anchorage. And they're competing in 5 different sports, and gold medals are being won left, right, and center. And Mary Ellen, yes, has already won 1 gold medal. And she may have already by now won more, but I don't know what's going on at the swimming pool. And you know, the Special Olympics athlete's oath. Let me win. But if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. And that, I think, is a great motto for everybody to remember. That's about always doing your best. Because you can't win every single game because there's other people who are also doing their best. So what's the most important is for us to do our personal best. Because we can always win the game when we do our personal best, right? Yeah.